So if you look at solar, $752 per kilowatt. Compare that to like wind is $855. Offshore is way more expensive than that. Hydro or like nuclear is $10,000 per kilowatt. That's why there's no new build nuclear. Well, actually, there is new build nuclear, but it's like $10 billion over budget or something absurd like that in Georgia. But then also look at the O&M costs. So like a lot of people are talking about fusion, for example, as like that's going to be a huge breakthrough that'll allow abundant energy. Look at the O&M costs, $127 per kilowatt year. That's crazy. Compare that to solar, basically $16 per kilowatt per year. So like this is why solar is going to win, because not only does it have the lowest upfront cost, but it also is the lowest O&M cost. Now, if you want to be a little bit, a reasonable criticism of that would be that solar has the lowest capacity factor. So if you kind of adjust those for the capacity factor, the costs are going to look a little bit higher. So like wind, for example, is like maybe a third higher capacity factor than solar. So wind looks a little bit more economical on both of these metrics if you look at it that way. On what's called a levelized cost of energy, where if you spread the lifetime production of like a 30-year solar or wind plant, the upfront cost, the O&M cost, if it was a gas plant, you'd add the fuel and the maintenance. And then you essentially have like a cash flow stream. And if you present value that and divide it by the lifetime output, then you get what's called a levelized cost of energy. That's like the best way to actually do this. But even on that metric, solar is the best, and it's also decreasing the fastest. So solar is going to win for sure in this equation. But in order to kind of, you can't put all your eggs in that basket, because you need it. You need some amount of kind of base load power. You need some amount of, wind definitely complements solar because it blows more at night, like we said. So,
got it. Okay. So even with the capacity factor equation, solar does seem to be as long as these numbers sort of math out, it does seem like it would work. If it matches, for example, offshore wind per kilowatt hour at 50% capacity factor. So what that basically means is that solar is about half the capacity factor of offshore wind, but the install cost is 1/3 to 1/4 of it. So even if you have to double up your solar to get the net amount of capacity out of solar, it's still going to be cheaper per kilowatt hour than offshore wind, as an example, right? Yeah. Is that a good way of thinking about it? Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi guys. Hi Matt. How are you doing?
Hey, shout out to Florian. Florian's the founder of Mr. Green, for those who don't know.
Nice.
Thank you very much for your very impressive and passionate talk. My question is, can you explain something about the plans of Tesla, about their 30 monthly subscription for unlimited overnight home charging? How are they able to get that done for $30 a month?
Yeah, so it's unlimited home charging. It's only available in Texas, I believe, and I'm not even sure if it's available everywhere in Texas. Farzad, do you know the answer to that?
I think it's just Texas.
But is it everywhere within Texas, or is it only like select locations within
I think
Texas?
It's the whole state, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong, but yeah.
So I think that the way that they're able to do that is that like Texas, as we kind of already talked about, has a massive amount of solar and of wind in particular. So like the differentials between like peak and on-peak in Texas in ERCOT, which is the grid operator in Texas, are like massive. A lot of people don't realize Texas is like by far, like by probably 10 times, like there's more solar in Texas than in like California or anywhere else, any other state, like completely leading the way, which I think confuses a lot of people who just assume that like red states are anti-renewable development or something like that. It's just not the case. So like there is a huge amount of wind in particular in Texas that results in low or negative wholesale power prices on a somewhat regular basis during the overnight hours when demand is lower. And so I think what Tesla is doing, the math they're running, is they're saying, okay, we can buy this power on average at whatever their cost is. I haven't done the math, but then they're looking at all their charging data, I'm sure, and saying, okay, when do people charge their Teslas typically? And if we assume that there won't be a massive deviation in like the times that they are charging, then we can, and the quantities that they're using, I mean, that's another piece of the equation. Then we can actually offer this plan that makes like the decision from the customer a lot easier, and the economics of buying power on the wholesale market to kind of backfill that demand is reasonable enough that we're willing to kind of take the risk that the customer's behavior changes, or that they charge more, or at suboptimal times. So I would guess that like they've done all the math and they think that they can, maybe their cost is like $20 or something like that they're projecting, so they round up and say, all right, we'll sell it for 30. Obviously Tesla only has that data, but that's kind of my view of how this is shaking out.
Is it fair to say that this may be like a proxy way of capturing curtailed energy in a way?
Yeah,
just capitalizing on that.
The energy nerd in me would rather it be like that there is some kind of price signal to the customer, so that like, hey, if it's a peak time, don't charge, or if you do charge, then like you're going to pay 5 times more than your normal rate or something like that. Because really the best thing to do is like when all that wind and solar would be curtailed, charge then, because then it's just the best for the overall economy.
Great. All right, let's do the last 10 minutes on YouTube here. Let's pull up the next question. Looks like we have no more requests on Spaces. Let's go ahead and pull up the next question. Producer wife. From Hannah, great friend of the show. Question: what is Matt's opinion about hydroelectric power, specifically the supply being produced at Niagara Falls?
Yeah, so hydroelectric, for those who are not familiar, is like dams, or you can actually use the gravitational weight of water to be like what's called pumped storage. So essentially using water as a battery. Hydroelectric, I think, is great. Canada actually is doing a phenomenal job at hydro. They've got some very low power prices. They've built a ton of hydro, and frankly, they've got great hydroelectric resources. There's just not the problem I have with hydro is just that it doesn't really scale. I mean, a lot of the great hydro resources were developed 100 years ago. I went and toured some hydroelectric plants that were like built in the early 1900s, and like they've got the original turbines that Edison was working on to power these things. And there's like, it's nice. I mean, for the most part, they're small. I mean, if you want to do something big, like what China did at the Three Gorges, problem is like there's massive economic or ecological and like human displacement that caused. So like to do new hydroelectric dams is probably just not going to happen. So I think it's a great part of the resource. It helps with a lot of things, but I just don't see it having significant potential to scale.